3 days since Clara Reeves bled out between the brass section and the back bar at the Velvet Lounge. 3 days since Detective Jack Mahoney had slept longer than 90 minutes at a stretch. He kept seeing that leaf, dark red, perfectly centered on her chest like a calling card from something older and angrier than ordinary murder. Now he stood in the Monroe Street parking lot at midnight, his breath visible in the October air. Gerald Pitts, 42, accountant for Crestwood Municipal Holdings, was slumped against the driver's door of his Ford sedan. No signs of struggle, no defensive wounds. Death had come quickly and with professional certainty, a single puncture wound beneath the left clavicle. Pitts had a wife, 3 daughters, a mortgage, and a bowling league certificate in his briefcase. On his chest, held against his rumpled tie by nothing at all, no pin, no wire, lay another leaf, red-stained, precisely placed, waiting. Mahoney had bagged both leaves personally and walked them to the city's forensic consultant, a dry-mannered botanist named Dr. Ellison Faber, who operated out of a converted greenhouse behind Northwestern. Faber examined them under his lens for 12 silent minutes before removing his glasses and polishing them with theatrical slowness. Different species, Faber said. Mahoney had expected that. What he hadn't expected was what came next. The Reeves leaf is Quercus rubra, red oak, native, common enough. The Pitts leaf is Acer saccharum, sugar maple, also common. Faber paused. What is not common is the blood pattern on both. Identical dispersion, identical saturation depth, same source, detective, meaning the same blood soaked both leaves likely simultaneously. They were prepared together, in advance, carefully, which means your killer knew who would die before they died. Faber set down his glasses. And there's a third leaf, Frank. Someone left it on my doorstep this morning. Mahoney went cold. Back at his desk in the third-floor bullpen, Mahoney spread everything flat. Photographs, coroner sketches, employment records. He worked the way he always worked, horizontally, letting connections surface like oil on water rather than drilling for them. Clara Reeves, bookkeeper, Velvet Lounge, previously employed by Crestwood Municipal Holdings, same firm as Gerald Pitts. Overlap, 14 months, ending 1943. The third leaf, left at Faber's door, had been wrapped around a paper slip. The slip contained a name, James Dunmore. Mahoney pulled the directory. Dunmore, James R., City Procurement Officer, retired. Address on Dearborn. He cross-referenced Crestwood. Dunmore had signed their primary wartime contracts. 3 signatures in the city's procurement ledger for 1943, 1944, and 1945, all authorized through Dunmore's office. Clara Reeves had processed the invoices. Gerald Pitts had audited the books. Someone wasn't leaving souvenirs. Someone was issuing receipts, payments for something done, or something stolen. Mahoney reached for his phone. By Thursday morning, the Tribune had it. By afternoon, the Herald-American had photographs. By evening, there were 3 different radio programs speculating about a leaf killer, a phrase that spread through Chicago's neighborhoods with the efficiency of a winter cold. Mahoney watched from the precinct window as reporters congregated on the steps below. Commissioner Harold Voss had already called twice demanding an arrest. The mayor's office called once, which was worse. They didn't demand, they simply reminded in soft, reasonable tones that an election was 14 months away. The newsboys were working the corner with extra energy. Second body, bloody leaf, killer walks free. Mahoney's partner, Detective Roy Asher, dropped the afternoon paper on his desk without comment. Asher was 48, careful, and had learned to communicate primarily through strategic silence. "They're calling him a communist," Mahoney said, reading the editorial column. "They called the last one a communist, too," Asher said. "Last one was selling surplus coal. People need a word for things they don't understand, Frank. They grab whatever's nearest." He paused. "Captain wants us downstairs." Captain Bernard Lyle had the look of a man who had made a decision he already regretted, but intended to defend past all reasonable limits. He sat behind his desk with the rigidity of a man strapped to it. "Thomas Reedy. Picked him up an hour ago." Mahoney didn't know the name. Asher looked at the floor. "Who is he?" Mahoney asked. groundskeeper at Riverside Memorial Park, has priors, assault 1941, and a weapons charge that got pled down. More importantly, he sells leaves. Lyle let that sit. Decorative arrangements, wreaths, funerary displays, has a booth at Maxwell Street Market. Captain, that's... He also has no alibi for either night in question. He owns a hunting knife consistent with the wound profile, and he was seen near Monroe Street the evening Pitts died. Lyle folded his hands. The commissioner has been informed. The announcement is at 5 o'clock. Mahoney looked at Asher. Asher studied the floor with renewed interest. "Let me talk to him first," Mahoney said. Lyle checked his watch. "You have 40 minutes. Thomas Reedy was 51, sunburned to leather, with the hands of a man who had spent decades hauling and digging. He sat in the interrogation room without visible distress, which was either the composure of innocence or the composure of someone far more dangerous than he appeared. Mahoney placed the crime scene photographs on the table and watched Reedy's eyes. Reedy looked at them the way you look at a road accident, uncomfortable but not implicated. "Those are bad," Reedy said. "Yes, I didn't do those. Tell me about the leaves you sell." Reedy explained his operation with the frankness of someone who had no reason to obscure it. Seasonal arrangements, dried and pressed, some lacquered. He named his suppliers, his customers, his Saturday routine. He expressed moderate annoyance about the arrest and significant concern about his dog, which was home alone. Mahoney kept watching his hands, still, untroubled. The hands of a man who worked with them, not against people with them. The wound profile, Mahoney knew, required precision, anatomical knowledge, a specific angle. Thomas Reedy's hands told a different story. Mahoney sent Asher to verify while he stalled the paperwork. Asher was back in 90 minutes, which was faster than expected and never a good sign when you were hoping a suspect might be guilty. "Card game," Asher said, dropping his notebook on Mahoney's desk. "Wednesday nights, 8 to midnight, at a barber shop on Halstead owned by a man named Gus Petrakis. 8 players, 8 statements, all consistent, none of them friends who'd cover for a man they barely know." He paused. "Reedy apparently cheats at gin rummy. 3 different men mentioned it independently. Nobody who cheats at gin rummy at a stranger's card game is building a cover story. What about the Monroe Street sighting? Witness said he saw a man matching Reedy's description. When I showed the witness a photograph, he said, and I'm quoting, could also be my brother Dash in Dash Law. Mahoney sat back in his chair and pressed his fingers against his eyes. "He was at the card game both nights," Asher added quietly. "Clara Reeves and Gerald Pitts. Both nights confirmed." "Right." Lyle listened to Mahoney's report with the expression of a man watching his house burn from a distance too great to do anything useful. 8 witnesses, Mahoney repeated. "Airtight. The man cannot have done this. The announcement has been made. Then unmake it. Frank." Lyle stood, which he rarely did during arguments, suggesting the argument had already been decided somewhere above both of them. The commissioner, the mayor's office, 3 city councilmen, and the Tribune's front page all currently believe Thomas Reedy is responsible for 2 murders. You are asking me to publicly reverse that before we found an alternative. I'm asking you to release an innocent man before the real killer adds another leaf to his collection. Silence expanded between them like something physical. "Hold him on the weapons charge," Lyle finally said. "Gives us 72 hours. Find me something real, Frank. Find me a name, a motive, something I can put in front of Voss that doesn't make us look like we arrested a flower salesman." Mahoney left without answering, which was answer enough. The arraignment was at 9 in the morning. By 9:45, while a public defender was arguing bond reduction for a man who shouldn't have been in the courtroom at all, the call came through to Asher's radio. 4th victim. His name was Dennis Hobart, 60 years old, retired city engineer, found in his apartment on West Walton, seated at his kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold beside him and the morning newspaper open to the crossword. He'd completed 7 answers in ink before someone entered his home, no sign of forced entry, and killed him with the same clinical efficiency as the others. Mahoney arrived to find the apartment neat as a catalog photograph. Nothing disturbed. No struggle. Hobart had known his killer or had trusted whoever knocked on his door enough to open it wide. On the table between the crossword and the teacup lay the leaf. Mahoney stared at it for a long time. Thomas Reedy had been in custody since yesterday afternoon. The reporters outside would do the arithmetic in about an hour. His wife Eleanor left a plate covered with a dish towel on the stovetop and went to bed at 10 without asking questions, which was one of the 1,000 ways she demonstrated more grace than he deserved. Mahoney sat at the kitchen table with his case files spread across the oilcloth and a pot of coffee going cold beside him. He worked in pencil, which felt appropriate. Nothing he was drawing felt permanent yet. 4 victims, all connected to Crestwood Municipal Holdings, though Hobart's link was thinner. He'd approved building permits for a Crestwood construction project in 1944. Brief contact, long memory on the killer's part. The contract spanned 1943 to 1945, wartime procurement, construction specifically, military housing at 2 inland bases, one of which was Fort Sheridan north of the city. The leaves prepared in advance. The killer with anatomical knowledge, someone who moved through the city without attracting attention, who knocked on doors that opened. Mahoney circled Fort Sheridan on his map, then drew a line to Crestwood, then stopped. There was a 5th name in the procurement ledger. He'd missed it the first pass. He called the city clerk's office at 8 sharp and asked for whoever handled historical procurement archives. The woman who appeared at his precinct at 10:15 was not what he expected. Helen Marsh was 55, angular, with reading glasses perpetually balanced on her forehead, and the composed authority of someone who understood exactly how much power resided in knowing where the paperwork was kept. She had brought a folder without being asked. "When you telephoned," she said, sitting across from him, "you mentioned Crestwood and wartime contracts. I thought you should have the complete picture." "How complete?" She set the folder on his desk with the deliberateness of someone laying down a hand of cards they'd been holding for years. "Complete enough that I've had this folder in my personal desk drawer since 1946, rather than the general archive. Complete enough that I didn't put it there by accident." She looked at him steadily. "I'm trusting you with this, detective. I don't trust people casually." Mahoney opened the folder. The top document was a letter of complaint, unsigned, dated October 1945. The second was a death certificate. The complaint letter, Helen explained, had been delivered to the city clerk's office in a plain envelope with no return address. It alleged that Crestwood Municipal Holdings had systematically falsified construction invoices on the Fort Sheridan housing contracts, billing for materials never delivered, labor never performed. The overcharges, calculated in the letter with precise and furious arithmetic, totaled just over $40,000 across 18 months. "Wartime fraud," Mahoney said, "on contracts that house soldiers." "Yes." Helen's voice remained level, but something behind it did not. The letter named 5 individuals as responsible parties, people who signed, approved, or received payment. Mahoney looked at his list. 4 victims, 5 names. The complaint was suppressed. I don't know by whom. It arrived on my predecessor's desk and vanished into a review process that apparently concluded it required no further action. I found a copy misfiled in 1946 and kept it. Why? Because the 5th person named in that letter died the same week it arrived, she said. He didn't die of natural causes and nobody investigated. Mahoney looked at the death certificate. Victor Salcedo, age 29. The address Helen had attached to Salcedo's name led to a narrow building on Wentworth Avenue, tucked between a dry goods store and a restaurant, identified by a modest painted sign as the Pacific Theater Veterans Assistance League. Mahoney went alone, on instinct, without telling Asher or Lyle where he was going. The man inside was ancient in the way of people who have survived extraordinary things, not diminished but condensed, as though experience had compressed him. He introduced himself as Mr. Tong and offered tea before Mahoney had finished explaining why he'd come. The office contained 3 filing cabinets, a photograph of Baton, and a citation framed on the wall. "Victor Salcedo," Mahoney said. Tong's expression didn't change, but something moved behind his eyes. recognition, and beneath it something that had been waiting. Victor came home in August, Tong said. He came to us in September. He had information about his Army housing, about what he had found when he was stationed at Fort Sheridan before deployment. He paused. He said someone was stealing from soldiers, that he could prove it, and then he died. Tong looked at his tea. In October. Tong retrieved a thin folder of his own, a habit, Mahoney thought, of people who understood that official records could not be trusted to tell the full story. Victor Salcedo had died on October 3, 1945. The official cause was listed as accidental, a fall from a fire escape at his rooming house on North Clark. The investigation had lasted 4 days and concluded without charges. No witnesses. No signs of foul play noted, though Tong's folder contained a handwritten account from Salcedo's landlady describing the fire escape as solid, regularly maintained, and something Victor Salcedo, who had served 2 years in the Pacific, would not have fallen from accidentally. He had a family? Mahoney asked. A brother, Miguel. He came here looking for answers in 1946. Tong looked up. He was very angry, rightfully. Do you know where Miguel Salcedo is now? Tong was quiet for a moment. The quality of the quiet was different from before, more deliberate, as though he was weighing something against something else. He was a medic, Tong finally said. Army trained, served in the Philippines. He met Mahoney's eyes. He knew anatomy very well. He drove north on Sheridan Road with the windows down, despite the cold, needing the air to think against. Fort Sheridan's administrative offices were technically accessible to law enforcement, and the duty officer, a young lieutenant with the polished efficiency of someone determined to be liked, pulled the 1943 to 45 housing construction files within 20 minutes. Mahoney read for an hour. The reports were immaculate. Every invoice matched, every material delivery confirmed, every labor hour accounted for by a signature. The signatures were varied and official. The paper was the right age, the right weight, too right, too consistent. In Mahoney's experience, real paperwork had variations, spilled coffee, torn corners, and authorization signed in pencil because the pen ran dry. These files were uniform in a way that suggested they had been assembled rather than accumulated. Someone had cleaned them, thoroughly, professionally, and with enough lead time to do it properly, which meant someone with access, someone in procurement or administration, or, his eyes tracked back to the authorization signatures, someone in the inspector's office that verified the work. The fifth name on Helen's list, the one still living. He read the name again in the parking lot, sitting in his car. James Dunmore. Eleanor answered on the third ring, the way she always did, her voice carrying the particular warmth she reserved for the telephone, as though it required extra effort to be kind across a wire. Mahoney residence. Silence. Not a dropped connection. Not static or distance. She could hear breathing, controlled, unhurried, patient as winter. "Hello?" she said again. The breathing continued for 4 seconds. 5. She told Mahoney later that it wasn't frightening at first. It was the patience of it that frightened her eventually. The sense that whoever was on the other end was in no hurry because they had already decided everything that needed deciding. Then a sound, not a voice, something placed against the receiver, a dry rustling like paper or like something gathered from the ground on a cold autumn afternoon, leaves. Then the line went dead. Eleanor stood in the kitchen holding the telephone for a long moment before she set it down carefully as though noise might bring something back. Then she went to the front door and checked the lock, then the back. Then she sat in the kitchen with the overhead light burning and waited for her husband to come home. Mahoney's car was already turning onto their street.